Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. Still broadcasting in high-quality mono sound at AM 1570. Make sure you're setting the dial for us. We're going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour, giving away some Raven scratch-offs. I got my 31st anniversary going on this week. We'll be at Fadley's on Friday with Dan Rodricks on the backside of his incredible stage play last week we saw over at Hopkins about the city of Baltimore. And then next Thursday, a rock and roll celebration at Costas in Dundalk with the queen of Dundalk rock and roll. Gina Shock from the Go-Go's, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, will be with us, as well as a whole bunch of things about Hammerjacks. You know, I knew this guy back when I was running around Hammerjacks, being the Cameron Crowe Almost Famous guy at the Evening Sun back in the 80s. He was covering all things Garyland and golf and writing books, and we love having him on. John Feinstein joins us again after many, many months away, sequestered, working on a book on David Faraday, and it's basketball season, dude, and you're at the Palestra, and you're on my timeline before they threw me off of Twitter, and I'm like, I got to call John and see how things are at the Palestra, because I started looking at the dates so Girardi and I could get there, you know?
Well, you've got to go to the Palestra. Congratulations, Nestor, on your wedding anniversary. I've been married 30 years myself.
No. It's radio anniversary. My wedding anniversary.
Radio anniversary. Okay, well, not as much.
That's only 20. Then. That's not 31.
Okay.
No.
Well, 20 isn't bad. I made it to 18 with my first marriage. I'm on 12 with my second. So 20 is pretty good.
I'm 20 right there, and I'm 31 on radio, but a lot of different places, but only here for 24 years. Basketball season, and you've been through all of this, right? Like, I mean, I remember back in the 70s getting the old Toyota ACC guide and seeing what's going on with Duke and North Carolina. And that is so not college basketball now. And as a lifer fan, as a fly-in, I went to the Cal Senior luncheon back 2 months ago. Willard's there, Villanova coach, Jay Wright, the whole deal. And they're talking about this NIL thing. And I'm just the idiot here asking you, teach me a little bit. I mean, teach me what are the unintended consequences for Towson and Coppin in all of this money that's going to athletes now?
Well, obviously, the big-time schools, you mentioned Villanova and Maryland, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, anybody you want to mention who is a perennially ranked team, they've got lots of alums and lots of boosters with lots of money. And the money is flying around out of control right now. And really, there's nothing that can be done to stop them because the Supreme Court said that college athletes are entitled to control their name, image, and likeness, NIL. And I heard the other day that Oscar Tshiebwe at Kentucky is making about $6 million this year to return and play at Kentucky. It's no longer against the rules in any way, shape, or form. And, I've said this often, in a utopian world, paying players is the right thing to do, but we don't live in utopia. And schools like Towson and Coppin and UMBC and anybody else you want to mention who don't have that kind of money are sort of scraping around trying to find enough money that they can recruit players who can compete in the America East, that can compete in the CAA, that can compete in the MEAC. It is a different world, but the other major issue, Nestor, is the transfer portal, because you've seen it in the last couple of days. Kid gets benched, he says, "I'm in the transfer portal," football or basketball or any sport, actually.
Well, the coaches spoke about this on stage. They were speaking of this transfer portal as this purgatory of hell, not as a place where I could go and pluck somebody else's kid, but there's always been this perception. I mean, we were talking about Turgeon this week and Suleiman and the best team Turgeon had and all that stuff. The transfer thing has been going on, and it used to be like some sort of scarlet letter, and you had to sit out. Like, I don't know what I'm just really trying to reassess my level of involvement and my intellect for it, because I used to know there were bags of money, and I didn't want to know. I don't want to know.
Well, there were bags of money. The biggest difference now is that players are being paid over the table rather than under the table because the rules no longer prohibit it. But the transfer portal, obviously, transfers have been around forever. But it used to be that you had to sit out a year to transfer. You mentioned Rashid Suleiman at Maryland. He had graduated from college, so he could play right away. That was how the rules started in this direction. They said, okay, if you have a degree and you have eligibility left, you can transfer and play right away. But then the transfer portal was completely opened, and a player can literally transfer today and play tomorrow at his new school. There's no sit out rule. And we're looking at situations where players are transferring once, twice, three times. We're looking at situations where players are being recruited by other schools because you remember the Condoleezza Rice committee that Mark Emmert put together after all the scandals involving Penn State and other places. We're going to come up with a bunch of rules that are going to fix college athletics. Well, one of their brilliant recommendations was to allow players to be involved with agents as early as high school. So now college players, anybody who's a college player of any note who's got a chance to make money, they all have agents. And the agents, because they're such great guys, they go to kids playing, let's say, at Towson, and he's good. So what happens is they go to a higher level program and say, okay, Nestor Aparicio is averaging 22 a game at Towson. How much can you get him in NILs if he transfers next semester? Then they go back to Pat Scarry and say, unless you come up with X dollars in NILs, Nestor's going to transfer next semester. I mean, it's a completely professional situation, and yet you still have all these administrators running around saying, excuse me, Nestor, we want to do what's best for the student athlete. Well, there are no student athletes anymore.
Was there anybody with integrity at the NCAA that really cared about any of that? I mean, who was?
Well,
we always thought there had to be a grown-up.
Cared about was image. That's why they would always throw the student athlete thing out at us all the time. Oh, so and so Nestor's a student athlete. Well, first of all, it's redundant. By rule, you have to be a student in order to be a college athlete. That's just a rule. But they used it as an hypocrisy to say, oh, look, you remember those? You've seen those NCAA commercials where the swimmer jumps out of the water and starts playing the violin because they're student athletes and they do all these wonderful things. That's a bunch of hooey. We know that, especially with the one and done rule in basketball, where the top recruits are just looking for the door. Now, that rule's going to go away in the next collective bargaining agreement next year, fortunately. And we'll go back to having guys like LeBron James and Kobe Bryant, who are great players coming out of high school, go straight to the NBA. And why the heck not? I mean, I always said years ago that when I was in college, if the Washington Post had come to me and said, we think you're the next great sports writer and we're going to pay you $100,000 a year, which was like $1 million a year back in those days, I never would have graduated. And who cares if I'm making that kind of money? And so it'll be better, but it's the Wild West now, Nestor. It just is.
Well, that's what I called it. And you have done nothing in the last 9 minutes, John Feinstein, to make me feel any more at ease or at home or more aligned with Coppin or UMBC or Towson or the local schools that I've been going and watching play ball for, as you have been for years as well. Like, I don't know what it means. Does it mean that they're going to get $5,000 in free pizza off campus? I mean, is that what it means at Salisbury and some of these places?
Yeah. In fact, I was talking to a low mid-major coach a couple weeks ago, and I said, what do your NILs look like? And he said, well, we have a deal with Chick-fil-A.
But they're not open. Where are they? You can't eat on Sunday.
You can't eat them on Sunday, right? You have to go to McDonald's on Sunday.
All right, so look, college basketball season and Maryland and the start that they've gotten off to, and I do want to air this through the holiday a little bit and promote your book and stuff, and we'll talk a little Army-Navy. I know that's going on as well, not in Baltimore, but in the case of college basketball season here and getting into it and feeling it, Maryland is on to like another page, right? And unlike a lot of these places, there have only been a couple of pages here. There's been some Drizel, there's been a little minute and a half away, there've been a lot of Gary, and then the Turgeon thing, which is this maligned thing over the last decade and moving into the Big Ten and all of that. This guy feels like he has some temperament for this. I mean, just in the early part, I only watch it from the outside. I've only met him once. I'm not at the press conferences. It feels like he's ready to take on the Wild Wild West in a way that Gary and Lefty and Johnson, none of those guys would have, Krzyzewski, none of those guys want any part of this.
Yeah, well, you're right. And that's why we see a lot of coaches retiring, very successful coaches. Krzyzewski, Jay Wright, Roy Williams come to mind right away. They didn't really want to be part of this Wild Wild West we're talking about. But Kevin's younger. He's the son of a coach, a very good coach, Ralph Willard, And he was in the Big East before he came here, so he knows what it's like to coach in a high intensity league, both in terms of recruiting, and we'll see with recruiting, and in terms of the games. And the Maryland fans are all excited because they hated Turgeon. I mean, Mark just never connected with Maryland's fans, even when he was having success.
Why do you think that was? Give me a postmortem on that.
There are a lot of reasons. I mean, first of all, you mentioned Lefty and Gary. Those are tough acts to follow in terms of personality. They're unique. There was nobody like Lefty, and very few people brought the kind of intensity to the game as Gary did. I mean, Gary was intense having breakfast. I mean, I've had breakfast with him. He's intense. And Mark doesn't come across that way. Mark is a competitor. Mark wants to win. Mark knows how to win. He's a very good coach. But in this market, which is Washington, which is very much a professional market, so is Baltimore. I mean, Baltimore has the Ravens and it has the Orioles. Washington has professional teams in all four major sports. And so they treat the top college teams almost like professional teams in terms of performance. I mean, Georgetown is at the point, Nestor, where next week they're going to give away tickets to a game against St. John's, not a game against St. Leo's, a Big East game, because they're so bad and they're so desperate. Maryland, Mark had success, but he didn't win a national championship. He didn't go to the Final Four. Maryland people will tweet me and say, well, Mark had a great regular season record, but he was terrible in postseason. Well, he wasn't terrible. He just wasn't great. And I remember going back to the turn of the century when I had Maryland people saying, we need to move on from Gary. He's just a Sweet 16 coach. Quote, just a Sweet 16 coach. Sweet 16 is pretty good. But I think Kevin is more intense on the court. The fans like to see that. And they like the 8-0 start. And they've had a couple of impressive wins. Beating St. Louis and Miami up in Connecticut was impressive. And winning the Big Ten opener against a good Illinois team was impressive. It was at home. But I think Maryland people did not treat Mark Turgeon well. But I think they've got a good coach in place now in Kevin Willard.
I love talking to you, John, because, I mean, you've been through all of the wars here, right? You remember when the Orioles were a big deal and they weren't. You remember when the Nationals were a pipe dream and now they're not. You remember when the Capitals packed them in a couple of different times, and
they
the
still
Bullets.
Do, by the way. Caps still pack them in.
Yeah, and this coming and going. I mean, the Ravens have tons of empty seats. The Washington football team is just a complete disaster. That's its own. You and I could do hours on that over coffee one morning, right? But just how sports changes and how you're always looking for that new thing, and where the Terps are. They sold a lot of tickets last week. People are there. It's new kids on campus. They may suck an old guy like me or an old guy like you in when they are interesting. And maybe I will get in my car and go back down there because I want to see the newspaper and the shake and the you suck. And I want to relive all of that. But after the plague, trying to put people together again. That's one of the reasons I want to go to the Palestra. I want to go do some things I've never done. But
you should go to the Palestra. Nestor, DC fans, more so than Baltimore fans, DC fans are among the greatest front runners ever. That's why I mentioned the hockey team does continue to pack them in, because they sell out, whether they're really, really good or what they are right now, which isn't really, really good. The Wizards, the hardest part of a Wizards ticket is trying to get out of the arena most nights rather than getting in. And you've seen that now the football team, Washington football team, Dan Snyder's the worst owner in the history of sports. And if I had been a fan of that team, I wouldn't go to that stadium anyway. It's a dump. And it kind of ticks me off that Army Navy is going to go back there rather than go to M&T Bank Stadium in the next 5 years. It's just a stupid decision. But when Maryland's winning, people show up. When Georgetown's winning, people show up because they want to be. I'm a fan of this team. Well, be a fan of the team when they're not winning, and then I'll be more impressed.
John, I know your time's short here. A golf book, Faraday, give me dates, give me all of that. And I mean, we're not thinking golf because it's 20 degrees outside, but you're always thinking golf.
Well, as a reporter, I am. David Faraday's a unique character. The title of the book is very clever. It's Faraday, like his TV show. He grew up in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. He's a remarkable person. He's lived through great tragedy, lost his son to a drug overdose. He has an amazing sense of humor. He and Jim Valvano are the two funniest people I've ever met. And this book is his story. And it'll come out late May, early June in time for Father's Day and for the U.S. Open.
All right, I'll bother you before the Azaleas and maybe rub elbows with you over at UMBC at some point or at a
Not
football
doing
game near
UMBC
you.
anymore. Not doing UMBC anymore, Nestor. But I'm sure we'll run into each other.
All right, next time you go to the Palestra, I'll drive and we'll get cheesesteaks and pretzels. We'll do it upright. But I got to. Is there anything else I got to get to that I haven't
Have
gotten
you
to?
been? Well, you've been Army Navy, right?
Yes.
When it was in Baltimore. You got to go to the Palestra. My three favorite college basketball arenas are the Palestra, Cameron Indoor Stadium, Allen Fieldhouse. I don't know if you've done all or any of those
Done
three.
Allen, haven't done Cameron, but I loved Purdue. I loved Mackey. I thought
But
that was
Mackey is a terrific place. The media seating sucks, like in most of the Big Ten. It's a fun arena. If you're talking about other Big Ten arenas, Michigan State is a terrific place to see a game. That'd be my favorite Big Ten arena.
all right. Well, now the Terps are back on the radar with new coaching and leadership. I got to think about spending a night in February in Iowa or something like that. John, I appreciate you. Good luck with the book. Enjoy your holidays. Enjoys all the hoopsing you're doing, and I'm sure as Maryland gets better, we'll see you courtside over there a little bit too. So it'll be good to run into
And
you.
the media seating sucks there too, Nestor. So don't hold your breath.
So when you can see the game better on TV, you stay home. Is that the
Yeah, I don't have to drive. I don't have to worry about parking. I don't have to worry about traffic. I don't have to worry about having an obstructed view seat, which is where the media seating is. I told Mark Turgeon that a few years ago because he asked me why I didn't come to more games. And I told him. And he said, well, what if I got you a ticket right behind our bench? I said, Mark, you think I want to sit with your fans? And he said, yeah, good point.
Hey, man, take care of yourself. Have a great day. All right.
All right, you too. Happy holidays.
You got it, John Feinstein. Join him out on Twitter. Buy his books. I've got a dozen of them in the back here, and follow his work as we examine the wild, wild west of the new NIL. I am Nestor. We are WNST. AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, celebrating 31 years next week with some crab cakes and some rock and roll. We are BaltimorePositive.com.